This week's story is about defying gender norms in the early 20th century, leading a life of adventure and chaos, and experiencing all the joy and heartache that comes with committing to authenticity. This is about a woman who was forced to marry a reverend when she was just 19 years old. And when she wanted out of the marriage and was refused a divorce, she told her husband she was going to live on her own terms. She became a stunt pilot and test pilot, breaking speed records and winning races. She tested planes that would eventually be flown by Buzz Aldrin. In fact, the first plane Buzz Aldrin ever piloted, she was the one who tested it. She was the first woman stunt pilot in Hollywood. She created a safe community for women. She unionized stunt pilots and doubled their pay. And she did a whole bunch of other things, but one of the most remarkable was that she sued the government and won. This week, Andrea and I are bringing you the story of Professor Thaddeus Lowe's granddaughter, Florence Leontine Lowe, aka Pancho Barnes. Are you excited, Andrea?
I am very excited. We discovered her existence in our Thaddeus Lowe episode, and she just sounds so interesting and so deeply tied to LA history as well. So I'm very excited to hear more about her.
Before we get into her story, though, what's the spookiest thing that's happened to you this week, Andrea?
You know, I don't have a lot of spookiness around me often, but I have noticed my lights flickering a lot more in my house, and I'm like, electrical or demons? So I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah. So trigger warning, pet death. I kind of figured out what the flickering lights were for me. So as you have heard previously, I've had flickering lights everywhere. I had a flickering light in my house. My landlord said, that's weird because those lights are supposed to last 20 years. And I said, well, it needs a new light. So he put in a new light. He's like, well, this one's going to last for 20 years. And it lasted a day and started flickering. Kind of about the same time it started flickering again, I noticed my beloved pet sheep, who I have had for 14 years, started declining health-wise. I was calling around vets, seeing who could see her. It's very hard to find a vet who will see a sheep. As the night progressed, I realized I think what we need to do is find a vet who will euthanize her. As I kind of made that decision, the light just went out completely. Hasn't turned on since. I was able to find a vet. I took her and sadly was there while she passed. I mean, she had a good life. She was 14 years old, which is very long past most sheep expiration date. But it is very, very hard and tragic. And I cried for like 3 days straight. But when I left the vet office after she went to sleep for the final time, the big street lamp that I was parked under was flickering. And I think the lights are like possibly connected to a spirit letting you know that maybe it's on its way out, because the light in my house still hasn't turned on at all. It's gone completely out. And I have 3 sheep and there's 3 lights, and one of the lights is out. Gone completely. So your flickering lights, maybe it's a sign that there's like a soul on its way out that you know.
There's a lot of possibilities for that. Besides just the animals, there's, as I'm in a very densely populated part of Long Beach. That's really wild. But, she was a powerful presence, a very good sheep. And even though the light is currently out, I think that
it'll be really interesting if the light ever turns back on, and maybe is a sign that she has been reincarnated into another being, or what happens with that.
Yeah.
It's certainly better than a flickering, which is, I think, symbolic, because the flickering was she's declining, she's suffering,
she needs help. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the light being off completely, it's at peace.
Yeah. You just adjust to a different level of light, adjust a little bit of darkness. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out on the creatures around me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the story of Professor Thaddeus Lowe's granddaughter, Florence Leontine Lowe, aka Pancho Barnes. If you haven't checked out our episode on her grandfather, Thaddeus Lowe, definitely do that. It's episode 17, The Wizard of Oz of Altadena. And if you thought Thad was a character, wait till you hear about Pancho. A lot of this info comes from a 2009 documentary by Amanda Pope and Nick Spark called The Legend of Pancho Barnes and the Happy Bottom Riding Club. The Happy Bottom Riding Club.
Yeah, that's really excellent. 2009, that wasn't that long ago. They had to know what they were doing with that title.
She named her ranch Happy, and this is in the 40s and 50s, Happy Bottom Riding Club.
Yeah.
And she was definitely aware of the sexual connotation.
Yeah, she strikes me as a smart woman, so good for her.
Info also came from Pancho, the biography of Florence Leontine Barnes by Barbara H. Schultz. And I was casting Melissa McCarthy as Pancho Barnes, but Andrea, you and I were talking about Madeline Sammy.
Yep, 100%. I mean, well, I think she can do anything, so there's that.
Can Madeline Sammy do an American accent?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I also put down Nicola Coughlan, a possibility here as well. I think Madeline Sammy wins for the energy that Pancho brings. Pancho has a huge Madeline Sammy energy. And if you aren't familiar with who Madeline Sammy is, watch Deadlock.
Deadlock is so good.
It's a great series. Madeline Sammy is amazing in it. If she was a man, she would be winning all of the Golden Globes, all the Emmys, but she's a woman who is not conventionally feminine. And so no one gives a shit, but she is amazing.
She is amazing. Amazing comedic timing, which I think would be important for a role like this because Pancho was very much leading a life on her own terms, right? And I only know the barest of details, but from what I know so far, really living a very unconventional life, kind of flouting the norms. And you need to have like such an insane energy to do that. And Madeline Sammy is that.
Extremely sexual. And the way Madeline Sammy is in Deadlock,
right?
Extremely sexual. Yeah. That energy is like so Pancho Barnes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we need to write to somebody, make it happen, bring her over. Let's get it. Let's film it. I'm here. I'm ready. In what way? How will I help? I don't know. But let's do it.
Okay. Pancho Barnes wanted to be the fastest woman on earth. And a lot of the footage that we see of her is from the 1920s and 1930s. We have a picture in our head of what the 1920s and 1930s are like, what women were like back then. That was not Pancho. You look at these pictures of Pancho, she looks like a woman you would see nowadays. Like no makeup. Hair is kind of like huge and kind of shoulder length and just kind of doing whatever it wants. She's big. She's wearing pants. She's wearing whatever the frick she wants. And she's not conventionally attractive. And her vibe is extremely queer. And in multiple photos, she's shown like in front of this pinup painting that she has in her office of a naked woman on a blanket. You're like, okay, so she's a lesbian. She went on to marry 3 other men, all much younger than her, all conventionally attractive, like really attractive, like movie star attractive. And one of her husbands was 18 years younger than her.
Yeah, go off, cougar.
So her relationships are definitely like a boy and a girl can be gay for each other if their vibes are queer enough. Because also her husbands definitely have gay vibes to them. And her boyfriend, and she loved gay men. She would go to gay bars and pick up men there.
Yeah. I mean, and sexuality is a spectrum, right? We know this to be true now more than ever. So yeah, she was probably all over that spectrum. Bless her. That's amazing.
You know, and a woman who has sex with men can be a gay man. You know what? Queerness is a vibe. She has the vibe.
Very that. Yeah. I'm looking at pictures of her right now. And she looks incredibly happy, which is awesome.
She's always smiling.
Yes. And definitely like, you know, your lesbian gym teacher vibe a little bit, but like more fashionable. She does look quite fashionable.
Imagine you're a lesbian gym teacher going to the gay bars and picking up the youngest, most handsome movie star gay men and having raunchy sex with them all the time.
Yes, 100%. She looks like she's, just living a dream happy life. But I would love to hear more about it. Go on.
So Pancho grows up in a huge estate. And by the way, I'm calling her Pancho because that's the name that she uses later in life. She grows up, her name is Florence Leontine Lowe. So her name early on is Florence, but I'm going to call her Pancho. And then about halfway through the story, you'll find out why she goes by Pancho. Okay, so Pancho was born Florence Leontine Lowe on July 22nd, 1901. She's a Cancer, to a very wealthy Pasadena family. Her father is Thaddeus Lowe's son, Thaddeus Lowe II, who raises cattle and grows cherries. And her mother is Florence May Dobbins, who is super, super rich. A family owns all the stock in all the companies, and they just watch their money grow, grow, grow. Pancho grows up on a huge estate and is given a Shetland pony for her first horse and a thoroughbred for her second horse. She wins her first horse show trophy in 1906 when she's just 5 years old. She rides 5-gaited horses and jumpers and has a pet monkey named Jocko. She has a rooster named Jupiter, and she trains him for cockfighting.
What an absolutely wild childhood. What do you mean she had this many pets? Why is she winning trophies at 5 years old? Why is she cockfighting? There's so much happening.
Cockfighting is terrible, by the way. I just have to say that. But I think it's really chaotic that she's doing it as a young child.
Can I also, I feel like whenever we do this, I start talking about Seinfeld, but there's like 3 different Seinfeld episodes, all like happening just in this little snippet about her childhood, which is absolutely insane. Yeah, okay, I love this for her.
The girl who would eventually be named Pancho has a brother, Everett, who is very, very compliant and who her mother prefers. Pancho's loudness and messiness is a way to try and get her mother's attention somehow, but it only makes her mother even more frustrated with her. To deal with Pancho, her mother hires a nanny to teach her needlework, flower arranging, sewing, piano, and ballet. She gets to dance with the famous Russian ballerina Pavlov at an LA Philharmonic performance in November of 1911. This is a trend with Pancho. Every skill she tries, she ends up being very, very, very good at it, like the best at it.
I have to pause again because, I've done ballet on and off my whole life. And looking at her stature, I'm like, What do you mean she did ballet? What are you talking about? She's probably very strong, which is super important for ballet. And not every dancer is lithe. Like, that's not true. But it certainly helps with some of the things. So I would have loved to have seen that. 1911, she was a kid, right? Because she was born in 1901.
So she was still 10,
But even so, that is, I love that. I love the idea of this, like, large child, large meaning, like, big boned, right? Just like a healthy child doing ballet. We need more of that. Love that for her.
Professor Thaddeus Lowe, Pancho's grandfather, introduces Pancho to her love of flying and encourages all her eccentric ambitions despite...
Oh, does he? How shocking.
Despite her family being not into it. But when Pancho's grandfather dies in 1913, the same year as her brother Everett, who died of leukemia, the family... Pancho is traumatized by losing her brother and this grandfather who was the only figure who said, keep on going, girl, you're doing great. The family becomes increasingly annoyed with Pancho's misbehavior. Why is she misbehaving? Because she's freaking traumatized right now. But people weren't good at psychology and feelings back then. And they blame her unruliness on going to public school and associated with the lower classes of children. They send her to an all-girls school. Her grades drop, and Pancho and her friends often sneak away to play billiards, listen to phonograph music, smoke, or make alcoholic drinks.
Well, as someone who went to an all-girl high school, I had a great time because we were also partying all the time. So yeah, that tracks.
When her father finds out about all these shenanigans, she's sent to the Ramona Convent, a boarding school in Alhambra. And Pancho feels she's been banished, and she's even more angry and hurt. One night, she sneaks out on her horse and heads to Tijuana, which is 187 miles away, by the way. And so I tried to Google Maps to figure out how long that would take. By bike, it takes over 16 hours. So I'm assuming that's kind of comparable on a horse. And, actually, no, it'd probably take longer because you're not going on roads, going up and down hills. I'm thinking there's this horse race called the Tevis Cup. That's 100 miles. And one day it's 24 hours. So I'm assuming it takes at least 24 hours for her to get that far.
What an ultimate horse girl. Like, I'm sneaking away and I'm going to Tijuana.
On my horse. Yeah. So Tijuana is the mecca of horse racing in the teens because wagered horse racing was outlawed in California in 1910. For 2 weeks in Tijuana, she works various jobs on the racetrack. Eventually, her family gets her back and enrolls her in the Bishop School for Girls in La Jolla. She keeps on smoking and sneaking out. Her only interest is in horses. She also likes playing pranks on her older roommate. And on one occasion, she fakes her death. She like lays on the floor with like fake blood.
Committed to the bit. I love it.
And then on another, she brings her horse into her room while her roommate is out. And her roommate comes back in and sees a horse in their dorm room.
And probably horse shit.
Can you imagine if a horse peed in your room? Like
I can, and I'm upset about it.
Before graduating, Pancho dates a very good-looking, muscular Italian boy who poses as a model for life drawing classes. And one night, she beats him up when they get into an argument. And this is all the evidence, according to authorities and her parents, that Pancho is just out of control. And so Pancho finally graduates. And there is some like really shady stuff. Like the parents tell the boy, like, we will say that you raped our daughter if you don't like skedaddle and never speak to her again. Like, yeah, there was some like shitty stuff there. So Pancho finally graduates. And because her family are rich, society people, they pressure her to marry within their ranks. Her parents essentially select this Reverend Calvin Rankin Barnes, to be her husband. And I did his astrology. He was born March 23rd, 1891. Interestingly, he's born with a Moon-Saturn conjunction in Virgo, and Pancho is born with a Moon-Mars conjunction. So she's like Moon-Mars, passion, sexuality, like all that.
Like fiery, right? Kind of
fiery.
Which we know her to be.
Yeah. And he is born with a Moon-Saturn conjunction in the exact same sign. And Saturn is like cool, reserved, asexual, like non-fertile, like very businesslike, serious. So they are not good for each other. And interestingly, he is born on the equinox and she's born on the solstice, which is bizarre. But basically, these people are the exact opposite.
Yeah, could not be more opposed.
Yeah, they did not select the stars for this match to work out. He's 10 years older than her as well. Gross. He's a graduate of UC Berkeley. And though he's far below the Lowe's station in society, he's well educated. He's a religious leader. He's a reverend.
And she's still a teenager at this point, right? She's 18 or 19?
Yeah, 18 or 19.
It's a 10-year age gap when you're like 30 and 40, whatever. But when you're 18 and 28, that's disgusting.
Can you imagine being a 28-year-old and like dating a 19-year-old?
No. I don't even want to talk to a 19-year-old right now. I don't want to look at them. What are they doing? Nothing there for me.
So Pancho has been thoroughly brainwashed from a young age that this is the way you do things when you're a woman. So she consents. And also after her brother's death, she just wants to make her parents happy. She has never succeeded on that front for sure. She has a 17-month courtship with the Reverend. And at the wedding itself, no expenses spared. And I have found that whenever someone goes all out for a wedding and spends like $1 million and makes it a whole big thing, that's a sign that the marriage is not going to work out.
You never do that. Anyone listening, you're planning to do an expensive wedding? Don't. Bad juju.
Yeah. They honeymoon at the Grand Canyon, and Pancho comes to the marriage with a lot of sexual experience. She's spent her childhood watching pre-Hays Code silent films, and she envisions herself as a vamp. And she's had sex with all the schoolboys, the stable hands. She puts on like the sexy red outfit. And her husband is just not into it at all.
Well, he's a religious man. That's probably terrifying to him.
And also, he just seems like he has like strong ace vibes. Mm-hmm. Like he finds it all just very distasteful. And
which is fine, but then maybe don't get married.
Yeah. But, society back then was like, if you're a man, you get married. If you're a woman, you get married. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you're into it or not. Right. And, because you could be like the Reverend who's all buttoned up, but then like an animal in bed. And you could be
this one.
Not this one, though. He is very much not into it. And so Pancho is very disappointed with their sex. And she dreams of a day a screen lover will rescue her from this passionate passionless union. She gets pregnant, which is a bummer for all involved, on October 9th, 1921, Libra season. She gives birth to her son, William Billy Emmerich, named after her brother. At the hospital, Pancho shows more concern over the absence of her German Shepherd than the care of her son.
Vibes.
Which relatable.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine being forced to like be a mother and like, just give me my dog?
Yeah.
And she gets the hospital to allow her to keep her dog under the bed. The dog quickly becomes her son, Billy, his guardian. The dog and the son are inseparable.
That's so cute.
But, you know, as many women were back in the day, forced to marry and become mothers just because that was what you did, she's extremely dissatisfied. She's not a good mother. She doesn't want any part of it. Pancho puts her horses to working in the movies, and then in the horse opera circuit, which is horse opera was the term for like these westerns that they did back in the day.
I was like, are they singing?
Yeah, just there were like a lot of westerns in like the 1920s and 1930s. And through her renting out her horses, she's able to earn enough to hire a cook, a housekeeper, and a nurse for Billy. So her horses save her from having to actually do the shitty ass mothering thing, which brings up a good point. I would much rather, if I was forced to have a kid, I would much rather choose to be the father than the mother, because being a mother sucks. Being a father, you do your job, you show up once a week, you're a hero.
Yeah. Well, and the expectation that just everyone is, every AFAB person is automatically good at motherhood is, you know, not true. Wasn't true then, isn't true now. And she's just a horse girl. And you're trying to make her something she's not.
And I bet she was told, you're so good with animals and horses, you'll be a great mother.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Bet they use it against her all the time.
And my favorite thing is when people say that to me, I'm like, you're so good with babies. You should own pythons. You'd be a great python raiser.
It's a 1-for-1.
Okay. So she joins the newly opened Flint Ridge Riding Club, which I'm mentioning because everyone who's in the horse community knows Flint Ridge because there's a lot of horse shows up there. But back in the day, George S. Patton rode there. She trades polo ponies in Los Angeles, here across the street from me. She doubles for Amy Semple McPherson in horse shows. Amy Semple McPherson is the famed radio evangelist who is the Oprah Winfrey of her time. We did an episode 3, I think, was on her. She disappeared mysteriously. And when she went swimming one day, she showed up like 2 weeks later and said she was kidnapped in Mexico. It was a whole thing. It was, anyway, listen to the episode on Amy Semple McPherson. But she rides in horse shows pretending to be Amy, basically because Amy is a little bit scared of her horses and Pancho isn't. So Pancho's like, I will be you in the horse shows. During Prohibition, she and her friends find ways to get alcohol, and they set up a speakeasy in someone's cellar. While she's married to a reverend, by the way.
Right. And also with a baby at home.
Yeah. Pancho's mother dies unexpectedly on May 31st, 1924, leaving her a huge inheritance, 2 homes, land, rental properties, and stock, ultimately netting Pancho $500,000. Still, things are not happy in her marriage. So why don't they get divorced? Well, Pancho's husband wants to become a bishop. And if he divorces her, he'll lose that chance. And Pancho doesn't want to ruin his career at all. But she decides, while they'll stay married legally, she's just going to do as she pleases. And do your thing, girl. She becomes increasingly immersed in the film industry, getting hired as a second cameraman. And I'm not sure if that's a B unit cameraman or a second AC, but she films the horse operas. She works in Calabasas doing all this stuff. She's a script girl, a film cutter, an electrician. In late summer 1924, she gets her first job as a stunt person, being a photo double on horseback. She also collaborates on scripts with the great Austrian filmmaker Erich von Stroheim, who is a stable boy in Pasadena until his big break in 1919 with his film Blind Husbands. He also is known for the highly influential 1924 film Greed, which, if you went to film school, you've studied Greed. It inspired a lot of foundational filmmakers like Eisenstein and Sternberg. And you can see him as an actor in La Grande Illusion and Sunset Boulevard. Pancho and von Stroheim even had a brief business venture where they novelized von Stroheim's screenplays. She's doing all this before she's 30.
Right. I was just thinking, I was like, how old is she at this time?
Yeah.
What have I done with my life? Anything?
Yeah, no, and she's like 23 at this point, actually.
Right.
So her focus is on film and having adventures. She isn't much of a mother to Billy, obviously, unless it's something that interests her, like teaching him to shoot, ride, or care for animals. Billy's father is the disciplinarian, as a Moon-Saturn conjunction person would be. Mm-hmm. And in the 1920s, cruise ships are starting to become a big thing, and Pancho wants to be a part of it. She books a cruise to South America, and she has what's described as an outrageous, vulgar love affair with a man named Donald Shumway from Texas, who's tall, thin, sun-brown skin, black eyes, and he's described as having blazing white teeth. A little
horrifying. Sounds scary.
Or horrifying. Either scary or horrifying or hot. I don't know.
Maybe both.
Maybe, yeah. At Balboa City, Panama, they're supposed to transfer to the Cunard liner. We know all about the Cunard line now.
We do know all about them.
Laconia, but there's a delay because the Laconia was damaged while going through the canal. Pancho wants to explore, so the gang finds a supply boat willing to take passengers, and Pancho brings a movie camera along to document. There she watches a native boy fall from a tree branch and get eaten by a crocodile.
What do you mean?
I just saw that. I'm like, that's horrifying.
Yeah, like why are you filming that? Don't film that.
But everyone starts to get sick. In addition to all this horror, everyone starts to get sick with diarrhea and lethargy. They also visit a leper colony. I spelled that wrong. And a brothel. And
I think so together. Leper colony and brothels. You should definitely do one after the other. Which order is very important?
Order? I would say go to the brothel first, then the leper colony.
Yeah.
After.
I would agree.
Pancho buys obscene postcards and sends them back to her friends. Her biography has a lot of detail about this trip, but I'm going to skip kind of ahead because it's not the main point. Eventually, Donald and Pancho part. He leaves her a collection of poems he's written about her. One is titled The Jungle Kitten.
Yes.
And you can read it in her biography.
Fantastic.
It's through this that Pancho starts to believe the Latin culture suits her more than the white American culture. She starts dressing slightly Spanish and gives people the impression that she has Latin ancestry. She and her friends decide to hire a crew and sail their own boat to South America. And this crew consists of a dentist, a Paramount stuntman, an MGM cameraman, and a Laguna Beach actor. They head out in March of 1927.
I love that there's a dentist.
Right? This just sounds like a movie, like an ensemble for a little movie. Yeah. Let's go to South America and have an adventure. And this is like the strange little, like kind of a stagecoach, but like it's in a boat in South America. Also,
can I just go back and say, as a very, white presenting human who I have actual South American, ancestry, not even ancestry. My grandmother's 100% Bolivian.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, okay, girl, calm down. Okay. Some of us are actually out here really living that life. Go off, Pancho, I guess.
And can you speak Spanish?
Yeah, conversationally, it's not great. It comes and goes, but it does help with my ability to read other languages and good pronunciation. So that's very funny.
Yeah. They get caught up in the Mexican Civil War that's happening.
Of course.
It's a whole thing. They're detained by Mexican police for their own protection. They actually have to bribe the police to escape the police's protection. The biography covers all of this in much more detail. It's fascinating. It's interesting, wonderful side quest. Going to focus on the main narrative, though. On July 4th, Pancho begins her journey out of Mexico with a very handsome man named George Roger Shute. He calls her Sancho Panza, and she says she likes Pancho better, and that's how she gets the name Pancho.
A good-looking man calls her something, and she's like, you know what? Yeah, That's who I am now.
That's my...
She's an absolute character.
Yeah. They have to travel more than 700 miles together to Mexico City. The journey, again, whole movie, Roger almost dies from blood poisoning. The trip is a huge bonding experience for them. They spend 6 months together, and Pancho spends the whole time disguised as a man for safety, and she enjoys it.
Oh, yeah. Shocking.
Yeah. They get on a steamer to New Orleans. They get arrested in Austin, Texas as vagrants. In November 1927, they finally reach SoCal by smuggling themselves on a train, and they part finally, but their friendship remains, and they would cross paths again and again. They would remain kind of in connection their whole life. Mm-hmm. Upon returning home, she's dressed in the fashion of Mexican men, peasant pants, a man's shirt, a serape. She uses, again, Spanish phrases all the time. And I'm sure the Reverend was like, what did I marry?
Yeah. Who is this? What is happening?
And at this point, her and her husband move into their new home, the family mansion at 1350 Garfield Avenue in San Marino. It's not there anymore. I checked. It's sumptuously decorated and stocked with liquor acquired from Mexico.
It's like really giving that girl who goes to study abroad and comes back with an accent. Like that's 100% what I'm thinking of.
Yes.
But you know what? And she's super young still at this point, right? Yeah, so she is still finding herself and her identity, which she didn't even get to do because of her parents and her upbringing. So, you know, go off, Queen. I guess this would be a little weirdo. It's fine.
Her bedroom has a round platform bed, a built-in aquarium. She has a bar in her bedroom, Reverend's wife. It's all blue with blue curtains, and it's described as looking something out of the Arabian Nights. And I love this excerpt from the biography. Pancho's first official visitors to the much talked about San Marino mansion were local journalists who came to interview the socialite about her latest adventure. For her interview with Alma Whitaker of the Los Angeles Times, Pancho wore a white linen shirt opened a bit too far, jawed purrs, and a tie wrapped loosely around her open neck. Her deep tan still showed, and vibrant red lipstick made her eyes and teeth appear brilliant. Her wrist displayed a bracelet ornamented with rubies. The stones were the breast jewels of a female figure locked in sexual embrace with a male. Quite explicit. The pair dangled seductively in an effort to catch the eye of the most myopic.
That's my Halloween costume. Decided right there. That exact description. That is wild.
She begins hosting extravagant parties that are the talk of the town. Her husband is very much not into it. Cars block the driveway. There's random guests over at all hours. She talks openly about preferring her husband's brother and make overt comments at the dinner table like, and I quote, "What I need is a good fuck."
Okay, you know.
But can you see Madeline Sammy saying this and being in this role?
Yeah, 100%. First of all, I want to see her in this white and red outfit being described. Yeah. Second of all, of course, she could do that line and do it perfectly.
The Reverend finally moves out.
You had enough.
She reacts by pasting a photo of her husband inside a toilet bowl, taking a photograph of that photo inside the toilet bowl and hanging it in her entryway.
Yeah, that's a very creative processing.
You process your emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really harming anybody, so I guess it's good.
The Reverend leaves to take a job as an executive of the Episcopal Church in New York and appoints a member of the congregation to be his son's legal guardian. Pancho is now free of all parental duties.
Wow.
And Pancho keeps the name Barnes throughout her 3 subsequent marriages. At 27, Pancho has now accomplished more in her life than most people could ever dream of. But her grandfather told her that she would eventually own her own flying machine. She accompanies her cousin, Dean, as he takes flying lessons where the Santa Anita racetrack is now located. The teacher has been disappointed with previous female students who've been unable to side slip their planes onto this short landing strip. He's kind of like, I don't want to have a female student. He lets her take an introductory lesson for $5. He tries to scare her with a bunch of stunt maneuvers, but of course she loves it, and she decides she's going to buy her own plane for $5,000.
Wow.
She has a lot of setbacks, though, in her quest to be a solo pilot, but she persists, finally soloing September 6th, 1928, and she soon joins the ranks of early pilots who would test fly prototype airplanes. They also set new flying records and achieve celebrity status for their accomplishments, despite receiving very little pay. Many pilots use all their money on gas rather than meals. The types of flying she does, where she's making up her own stunts, sounds insane. And I'm actually surprised she survives all this.
Yeah, she's really, I mean, I guess, when you've already been through the Panama Canals and almost died of leprosy and diarrhea, and then your lover almost dies of blood poisoning, but he's also your friend, or whatever's going on. I guess after all that, why not just do crazy stunts in a plane by yourself? Who cares?
Well, Pancho does fly her husband to his church conferences. She can't escape her love of pranks and terrorizes the parishioners. I wrote prisoners. The parishioners. And terrorizes the parishioners by flying her plane directly over the church steeple. She builds her own runway on her Laguna Beach property, but the residents around
never change Laguna Beach. Never change.
Play as they would. In October 1928, a month after her first solo flight, she teams up with a parachutist and forms the Pancho Barnes Mystery Circus of the Air and performs aerobatics. During each show, she finds a random good-looking girl in the audience who's willing to try her first parachute jump and has her be part of the show. Just a random girl in the audience. And here is a direct quote from Pancho. And by the way, the name Slim that's used here is her parachutist. I had developed a special technique for these girl jumpers where I'd kick the tail of the plane around so that they would always clear it. The girl always landed safely and without injury. We would try to land and be the first one to her. Slim would smooch her a bit and pat her on the fanny, and she would be ready to make a jump of her own. The crowd always paid more to see the girls jump. Pull a trick like that today, and you'd be sued by everyone, including the Supreme Court.
That is an absolutely wild-ass quote, Pancho. What do you mean? You got random girls jump out of planes and kissing them. And well, I know Slim was the one doing the patting and the
kissing.
But wow, that's,
But you're literally just taking random girls and throwing them out of a plane for an audience.
Yeah. In 19, whatever year we're in, 28 or something. That's truly ridiculous.
And all the insane stories that I'm telling, these are not all of them. Like, I needed to cut a lot of things out because I'm like, I cannot make this episode 2 hours long. But this biography has some insane stories.
Yeah, I'm thinking now this shouldn't be a movie. It should be a TV series.
Yeah, because you could just go off with like all of her crazy shenanigans. Kind of a Mrs. Fisher's Murder pilot, 1920.
Mrs. Fisher's Girls in Airplanes.
She performs in air shows. She buys more airplanes. She's the 6th woman in the country to get a transport license and starts competitive airport racing. One starts at Glendale's recently opened airport. It's the Grand Central Air Terminal, and it's now part of Disney's Grand Central Creative Campus on Sonora Avenue. Basically, I say that because it's like 2 blocks over from me. And that is where Charles Lindbergh piloted the nation's first regularly scheduled coast-to-coast flight there from Grand Central. She tries to get sponsors for her attempt to break the cross-country flying record, which is 22 hours at that point. But she has a lot of setbacks because of her lack of frugality. She starts to have a lot of financial problems. She reaches out to her friend Roger from her South American adventure for financial help. Ultimately, she's not able to get the funds and is hugely disappointed. She takes on various flying jobs, ranging from flying for her cousin's airline to ferrying planes from Kansas to California and back. In 1921, Pancho finally gets the chance to participate in a woman's only long distance plane race from Santa Monica to Cleveland. It's called the Powder Puff Derby.
I think I should be offended by that name.
Yeah, I mean, they can't take any of the women's plane stuff seriously. The aviation industry actually loved playing up the gendered aspects because if the fair sex can pilot a plane, then anyone can.
What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Nonsensical sentence.
All of the major companies finance the individual competitors. And when a reporter asks Pancho why she flies, she says, to keep from exploding. That's why I fly. It acts as a safety valve so far as I'm concerned. On August 18th, 1929, 19 women with tools, a minimal amount of clothing, and emergency survival kits set off. Pancho's main competitors are Marvel Crossan, Louise Thaden, and Phoebe Omley. And this could be the movie right here. Yeah. Marvel began flying in 1922. This is a quote directly from the biography. She was an experienced Alaskan bush pilot and held the women's record for speed, altitude, and endurance. Marvel and Pancho both represented Union Oil Company as well as Travel Air in the race. They were also roommates at the overnight stops. Phoebe was the recipient of the first pilot's license granted to a woman by the Department of Commerce in 1927. In 1920, she set the altitude record for women parachute jumpers. Louise Thaden was the only woman to hold 3 records simultaneously: altitude, endurance, and speed. And during the first overnight stop, issues arise. There's a lack of security and ground services. There's no knowledgeable people there to refuel the planes or protect them from the public. Though the competition addresses some of these issues, Pancho realizes that the next stop in Calexico is unsafe for heavy air traffic. The pilots request an alternate route, but the race committee turned them down. Pancho authors and organizes a petition to make the next stop Yuma Flyfield, and because of Pancho's efforts, the route changes. Louise Thaden lands first in Yuma, Pancho second, and then they get devastating news. Marvel Crossan, who had previously set the altitude record by flying at nearly 24,000 feet, experiences an accident near Yuma, and Marvel is killed.
Oh, that's horrible.
A nationwide moment of silence is held, and the press speculates that Marvel was incompetent.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Headlines call for the race to be canceled. The women think that would be a disgrace to Marvel's memory, and they continue onward.
I mean, I know I'm not going to say anything groundbreaking here, but like, you know, if it was men having the race, no one would say that. It's just so
exactly.
Ugh, gross.
Exactly. The sexist. Basically, women can't do anything wrong because it'll be like, oh, it's because you're a woman. Mm-hmm. Whereas men can just like bumble into whatever thing, do a half-assed job. They're a hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they take off from their El Paso stop, Pancho has a ruptured gas line. Unfortunately, when she tries to land, a Chevy touring car is parked on the runway. She tries to miss this car, but her wing clips it and is demolished on impact. The Chevy's owner loses the top of his car. Audiences held the driver responsible. Like, why are you parking your car on a runway while planes are landing? But, you know, pilot way of thinking about things is, if a pilot hits anything, it's the pilot's fault.
Wow.
Pancho has to exit the race. Ultimately, on August 26, 1929, Louise Thaden lands in Cleveland, winning by making the journey in 19 hours and 35 minutes. And it starts to come out that sabotage was likely the reason for Pancho's busted fuel line and possibly the Chevy on the runway. From her biography, she writes this about the race. There was a lot of dirty work going on and many planes were tampered with and were so badly damaged, they were put out of the race. This happened to me in El Paso. And the majority of other flyers strongly felt that sabotage may have factored into a variety of mechanical problems, particularly in light of the note handed to Thea Rash in San Bernardino. It read, "Beware of sabotage." Wow. And when you think about it, there's a lot of folks who might want to sabotage these women's planes. Misogynists, competing airline companies. You want your competitor to win, so you're going to sabotage the other pilots, and just general troublemakers.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the care and consideration to organize a fair and safe race was not considered. And granted, it's the 20s, late 20s, you know, so maybe that wouldn't have been possible regardless. But certainly seems like the door was wide open for tampering and just generally messing with the contestants.
The racers become members of the 99s, an international organization of women pilots. The name is suggested by Amelia Earhart because out of the 126 women invited to join in 1929, 99 accepted. In June 27th, 1930, Pancho is able to purchase the fastest plane ever designed. She's hired by Howard Hughes to fly around a balloon that's carrying a microphone so he can add realistic airplane sounds to his film Hell's Angels, which became a huge financial success.
Something about her is like a magnet for weirdos. Like Howard Hughes?
Yeah.
What a string.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone in Hollywood is weirdo.
You know what? You're so right.
And
so
rich people, all rich people are weirdos.
Yeah. So you add rich plus Hollywood, like, yeah, now you're just dealing with straight up freaks. So yeah, that makes sense.
So with her new plane, Pancho sets an average speed record of 196.19 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour faster than Amelia Earhart. And Pancho participates in a number of other races. On March 1st, 1931, she flies from Los Angeles to Sacramento in 2 hours and 13 minutes. The next day, when she returns to Sacramento, Governor James Rolfe Jr. gives her 2 trophies in recognition for her record-setting flights. One reads, America's fastest woman flyer. And here's a nice quote from Eleanor Smith from the biography. I didn't know Pancho well. I had met her briefly in Cleveland and was impressed with her Western breeziness and her skill in handling her airplane. But I was soon to learn that Florence Leontine Barnes was an individualist all the way. Her casual dress, salty conversation, and predilection for foul-smelling cigars, which she lighted with kitchen matches struck on the seat of her pants, did not project the image of a wealthy patron of the arts. Her birthright obviously entitled her to. Pancho didn't aspire to be a dedicated pilot. She was one. And
that's amazing. I don't know which I like better, Western breeziness or salty conversation. Both excellent phrases.
Pancho continues to hold parties, often sending invitations to 400 men and 800 women. She sends a note on the women's invitations saying, if you're afraid to take your pants off, don't come.
Okay. All right.
Whenever she gets mistaken for a man, she unbuttons her shirt and asks, what do you think these are?
Fair enough.
Despite dressing like a man and having a men's haircut, she wears pink nail polish always. She still has aspirations for being a sultry vamp and has a closet full of makeup and sexy clothes.
Isn't that all of us? You know, the duplicitous of humankind, you know, you can, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean? Like we're capable of so many things.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Sometimes you want to be a vamp and sometimes you want people to think you're a man, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. To see, I mean, Pancho might be like non-binary, but, you know, just gender fluid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Gender fluid for sure. Enjoys a good, gender scramble.
Gender chaos for sure. At her parties, her guest book lists all the big names from Betty Davis to Will Rogers and also women pilots like Amelia Earhart. Pancho continues her relationships with young, attractive men, ranging from college students to pilots to movie stars. In 1931, she has a hysterectomy, so no further fears of becoming pregnant.
Yes, that is amazing that she was able to have a doctor do that for her, because you can't even do that now.
Yeah.
And
not with asking your husband.
Dedicated.
Yeah. She fell head over heels in love with Ramon Navarro, who I'm going to do an episode about him because he was tragically murdered. He was a famous silent film star, Latin lover, super sexy, super gay. He moves into Pancho's house. They sleep in the same bed. Rumors of love affair spreads. He does have his boyfriends, but I think Pancho was his boyfriend too.
Yeah.
And Ramon, previously very modest, becomes accustomed to the opulence that Pancho provides. The two are seen as a couple at Hollywood gatherings, and Ramon lavishes Pancho with gifts. And this guy is super, super sexy. Like, he is the famous silent film. Everyone's like, he's so sexy. And Pancho, look at photos of Pancho.
Right.
Pancho is not conventionally attractive. And I love that pairing so much because you see so much in movies, the kind of blah guy with like the sexy like girlfriend or whatever.
Right.
And I love the opposite.
Yeah, turning it on its head.
Yeah.
Playing with gender, playing with what is masculine, what is feminine, what is conventionally attractive. All of that. And I'll have to think about, who should play Ramon, opposite Madeline Sammy.
Ooh.
It's got to be someone kind of tiny, right? Maybe like a Ricky Martin. He might be too old. I don't want to say too old.
He's too old. Yeah, he has to be in his 20s. He has to be kind of Latin looking, very sexy, Who's that guy who was in Red, White, and Royal Blue?
Oh my God. Yes, him.
Yeah.
What's his name? Whatever. That guy. That's
him. There we go.
Yeah,
Madeline Sammy and that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I see it and it's beautiful. And I can't wait to
look up his name so that I can say his name.
Taylor Zakar Perez.
Taylor Zakar Perez, Madeline Sammy. Here's your vehicle.
Yeah. Come together as one.
Okay. Pancho helps get Ramon investing in stock and provides a foundation for his lucrative future. Pancho is quoted as saying, "I do have a few friends who are homosexuals. They are intelligent and sensitive, and I like that."
Same.
I know, right? Yeah, I think Pancho, she maybe didn't have the language to describe what she was after, but we know what she was.
Yeah.
Whatever Ramon and Pancho's situation is, it lasts less than a year. Stunt flying for films continues to be a part of Pancho's work. And after the Depression, the pilots are exploited terribly because newcomer pilots would underbid the more experienced ones, resulting in the wages being dropped. And there's no unions at this point. Safety on set diminishing as well. Seasoned pilots are working for as little as $7.50 a day. One company even hired a pilot for $5 a day.
That's ridiculous.
Well, on January 5th, 1932, Pancho unionizes the pilots, creating the Associated Motion Picture Pilots, with Pancho serving as secretary treasurer. This is more than a year before Screen Actors Guild is founded. And this union creates a monopoly of pilots, and they succeed in shutting down a Universal production that was using non-union pilots. They get $100 a day wages for stunt pilots, and that's equal to about $2,200 a day in today money, and $50 for just straight piloting. Pancho's current boyfriend, unionize you guys. Pancho's current boyfriend at the time, actor Duncan Rinaldo, faces criminal charges for falsifying his U.S. citizenship on passport documents for an MGM movie. He's convicted of giving false information, and he's imprisoned on McNeil Island. What Pancho does is she convinces Gilmore Oil to fund a promotional air demonstration, but her real agenda is to get to the East Coast to lobby her government friends in Philadelphia and New York and DC for Rinaldo's release. And in 1936, she's able to get a full pardon for her boyfriend from FDR, by the way.
Amazing.
She gets a full pardon from FDR, and he's able to resume his acting career and is granted full citizenship in 1941.
He was grateful for his.
And this guy, Duncan Rinaldo, from 1950 to 1956, he stars as Cisco on the top-rated TV show, The Cisco Kid.
Damn. Wow. He really owes her a lot.
Yeah. So immigrant rights, Pancho is all into it. Also, criminal justice system. She was like, fuck that.
Yeah. I mean, especially if she's having sex with them, then she's passionate about it.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
In the early 30s, Pancho starts the Women's Air Reserve, an organization dedicated to preparing to respond to help the country in a time of disaster. Pancho serves as commanding officer. Interestingly, in New York at the time, there's an ordinance prohibiting women from wearing masculine attire in public. So when a cocktail party is held for the Women Air Reserve at the St. Moritz and the women show up wearing their full dress pilot uniforms, it's kind of a problem. And it takes some explaining to get it all resolved. This is the 1930s. This is less than 100 years ago. It was illegal for women in New York to wear pants.
Sometimes you just want to quit life, don't you?
In 1935, Pancho finds herself in even more challenging financial circumstances. She leases out her mansion in San Marino and moves her horses and dogs to a little ranch in Muroc, located in the Antelope Valley near Buckhorn Dry Lake Bed. She finds gold nuggets on the land and names the ranch Rancho Oro Verde. The Flying OV is her brand.
That's
and
fun.
she digs a swimming pool and puts in a landing strip. She builds a dairy with 18 Holstein cows and 25 Toggenburg goats. She grows alfalfa, raises pigs, and keeps 2 of the pigs as pets, which is bizarre. You're killing pigs,
Right.
You're keeping pigs as pets. I don't understand how.
I just like these two. No other.
I don't understand the cognitive dissonance that happens when
Right.
people do things like that. She shows and races quarter horses. She has 2 shires that win the Antelope Valley Fair. Even with all this going on, she still throws parties and celebrities come in and ride, swim, hunt coyotes. Oh God, this hurts me.
Yeah.
They hunt at Pancho's Place. As the local Muroc Army Air Base expands, Pancho's Place becomes a restaurant, a hotel, and a bar for the pilots and everyone who works at the air base. She holds numerous events at the place, ranging from treasure hunts to rodeos and barbecues. She gives pilots a free steak dinner if they break the sound barrier. In 1940, Pancho gets a contract to supply planes and instructors for the civilian pilot training program. Kern County leases Pancho's ranch airport, which becomes airport number 12 within the county. And with a contract in hand, she sets out to start buying airplanes. And classes soon begin. And even though the program regulations allow for 10% of the pilots to be women, the main administrator of this program does all he can to keep women out. But Pancho, obviously, when women are able to get through, she creates a safe space for them. Pancho,
I can't, my brain is like hurting with like how many things that she's doing. Like I'm losing track. I'm like running a restaurant and a bar, but also like the pilots are there. And also she's got a farm, and also she's like supplying people to this program, but she has to fight to get the women in. Like, how does she have the time?
and she unionizes.
And she's unionizing. She's a treasurer.
And then she's getting her boyfriend out of prison.
Yeah.
What just one of those things would take all of our time.
My entire lifetime to do one of those.
This is pre-internet.
Oh,
so she's
boy.
like writing letters and look,
Wow.
I
gotta do more. All right. I'm
So
ready.
Pancho builds an airplane hangar to qualify as a secondary school. She celebrates the construction with a 5-day grand opening, and the pilots fly in from everywhere. And one pilot from Fresno, I should say guy, because he hasn't had flying experience at this point. This guy from Fresno, he doesn't have a high school diploma or any previous flying experience or any money, but Pancho lets him go through the training program in exchange for working on her ranch. He uses the training program to then go into business for himself as a pilot delivering warplanes during World War II. That man was Kirk Kerkorian, and he goes on to become a billionaire businessman and real estate investor, building the 3 largest hotels in Vegas. He then purchases MGM Film Studio in 1969 and donates over $1 billion to help rebuild northern Armenia after the 1988 earthquake. And Armenia gives him the title National Hero of Armenia.
There's so much happening in just the way you said this. I'm like, okay, so she gave this man a chance. Good for her. That man becomes very wealthy despite having no education. Again, good for him. And then he uses his wealth to help rebuild Armenia after a disaster, and then is their hero. Wow. So much going on. Wow. She's really...
In 2008, Kirk Kerkorian was the richest person in California and the 41st richest person in the world with a net worth of $16 billion. And he liked his expensive clothes, but he kept on driving a Pontiac Firebird, a Jeep Cherokee, and a Ford Taurus, which I thought I saw that and I was like, I just have to mention that. That's interesting. He dies at the age of 98 in 2015 and is actually buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery in a very simple grave with his dad. I looked it up on Find a Grave. It's just a plaque in the ground. Nothing fancy, nothing special.
And I have never heard of this very wealthy man who apparently also lived in Southern California.
Well, there are a lot of billionaires who you don't hear their names.
I guess for a variety of reasons.
Because they should go on a list.
Because they should be on a list. But I guess good for you, Kirkorian.
Yeah. So after Pearl Harbor gets bombed and the U.S. enters World War II, all airports within 150 miles of the coast get shut down. So that means Pancho's place gets shut down. A training school further inland buys Pancho's planes, and all the students have to leave for other schools. Pancho finally officially gets divorced when her husband files citing mental cruelty. She then marries one of her unofficial students. He was a pilot who was colorblind, so he'd never actually be allowed to be an official pilot. But she was just his instructor, probably because you have a cute face. I'll teach you how to fly.
That's the criteria, honestly, for anything.
He was there with his brother doing ranch chores in exchange for room and board. And Pancho married him because, and I quote, he was better in bed than his brother.
She's got a thing for brothers.
Yeah. Pancho's ex, meanwhile, turns down a bishop's post in Hawaii. That's what he wanted. Wow. And he ends up marrying an elegant society woman.
Bless him.
No longer a training school, Pancho puts more of her efforts into her horses. Guests can rent horses for sightseeing and moonlight dates. Films rent her horses for production, and movies shoot on location at her place. She gives riding lessons and hosts rodeos. At her rodeos, she has a beautiful woman with long hair ride naked around the arena during intermission, announcing her as Lady Godiva. And that,
what a job, right? To be the Lady Godiva character for that. Like, hey, how are you at horses and also being nude? That's it. Those are the two qualifications.
And it gets people to come in many ways.
Right.
At a stockholders meeting in Philadelphia. This is actually her mother's family's stockholders meeting because these are rich people. She meets a man who would become her third husband. Before she returns to California, she phones her second husband, that brother that she was sleeping with, and tells him to pack his bags. She was bringing home another man to replace him. In December 1944, she's able to reopen her airport. And
I'd like to point out that at this point that she's going second husband to third husband, she is now in her 40s. That's fantastic. Go off. Life is whenever you listen, 40's the new 20, even back then.
Yeah. And he was 18 years younger than her. So she's in her 40s and he is, I don't know math, in his 20s, early 20s.
Probably mid 20s, which again, as someone who is almost 40, I don't really want to talk to someone in their mid 20s, but hey, if it works for her, I guess. Yeah. You know, his brain should be fully formed by that time, so I guess it's fine.
But 4 months after her wedding, Pancho and her third husband do divorce.
Might have been the age gap.
He doesn't like that Pancho lets the dog sleep in the bed. And he also tries to get Pancho to sell the ranch and move to the city. But after their divorce, she and him still remain close. She stays friends with her exes. It's great.
That's nice. Also, I would say, I would absolutely, it would be the hill I would die on. I'm like, no, my dog is sleeping in my bed with me.
Yeah.
That is, I would die on that hill as well. So good for her.
Bye. The dog is first priority always.
Yeah.
He actually goes on to get married 5 times, but tells his sister later that Pancho was the only good woman he had ever known.
Fantastic.
Her ranch begins hosting kickoff parties for flying races and becomes a members-only club, and finally gets the name the Happy Bottom Riding Club. So and there's a bunch of different legend and lore about why this name was chosen. In the book, Fred Reynolds, the base's eye surgeon, is credited for one version. Pancho told Barbara Mitchell during an interview in 1962, Dr. Reynolds noticed that all newcomers hurt in some tender areas after their first ride, so that they couldn't even sit down to eat. The old timers had happy bottoms because they were toughened from riding a lot. Fred proposed naming the full-fledged members a part of the Happy Bottom Riding Club. The name stuck.
Y'all can't see me, this is audio, but I am clutching my head because I'm like, oh my God, does he know what he's saying? Is that purposeful? Is that an accident? Like,
I think he's just thinking about horses, and
right.
I don't think he's
Well, I've definitely heard about those happy bottoms toughened from a lot of writings. Yeah. Okay. All right. Love it. Happy Bottom Writing Club.
The club would become legendary. She collects out-of-work starlets from the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel and has them...
Always the Roosevelt. Still to this day.
Always comes back to it. She has them come out to the desert on weekends to meet the heroes of the war. They work at the ranch in exchange for room and board. Tips are the only wages. They wait tables and dance with the customers. And this is a big part of what makes Happy Bottom so enticing, is she has all these really good looking hostesses there at the ranch. And here are some of the duties of a hostess as listed in the biography. 1, to be charming and pleasant to all guests, male or female. Don't just go for the guy with the wavy hair. 2, introduce yourself to all newcomers and introduce all guests to each other. Use first names. 3, attend to guests' wants regarding food, liquor, and dancing. 4, never spend an undue length of time with any one guest. Circulate. 5, be on time to take over your shift. Dress properly. Slacks are permitted until 4 p.m. Feminine attire after 4 p.m. Don't ask for any change in schedule or special privileges. Time off is never on weekends.
All right, a little bit of a rough boss. Fine.
Among the don'ts: don't be vulgar at any time. Don't sit on guests' laps or neck in public. The in public.
Right.
The in public. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, I'm feeling that this may have been some Hugh Hefner inspiration when he started his.
Yeah.
It's giving a very similar vibe in terms of rules.
Another rule: don't go automobile riding or flying without permission. This can cost you your life if disobeyed. So don't take the don'ts lightly. No girl is permitted to leave the ranch after 2 p.m.
Well,
what do you mean? What do you mean this can cost you your life if disobeyed? Is it that these guys are dangerous?
That is my assumption, that like if they're at the club drinking and like, hey babe, come get in my plane, I'm just going to crash it real quick. Like that's what I assume she's talking about.
Or I can't be held responsible for how these drunk men act with a young lady in their car.
Yeah. The car they're playing after 2 p.m. in general. Yeah. A lot happening there.
While we do not expect to regulate your personal life, we expect decency and discretion on your part. Should a boyfriend be a guest here and have his own room, you are permitted to visit him. We permit you to accept tips and gifts while performing your regular duties, but never are you allowed to accept money in remuneration. How do you pronounce it? Is it
remuneration?
In remuneration for the more intimate aspects of romance. In other words, no hustling on or off the job. This act would get you rapid transportation elsewhere. Yeah. Rumors of orgies and improprieties do begin to circulate. Pancho tells the Long Beach newspaper reporter, if any sex went on, it was between the people from town and airbase, not my girls. I keep them like virgins in a harem.
Wow, that's certainly a sentence that she said to a reporter.
Pancho would often work topless while doing ranch work and would take a leak in full view of the men. Local wives, fearing their husbands are spending too much time at the ranch, ask the sheriff to investigate. In 1949, the Muroc Air Force Base next to Happy Bottom changes its names to Edwards Air Force Base. The running of the base becomes increasingly bureaucratic, and in 1952, a plan is created to make a long runway to accommodate the atomic-powered aircraft. That runway would go right through Happy Bottom Ranch. Eminent domain, bitches. Pancho, and get this, Pancho believes that her grandfather was basically the father of the U.S. Air Force. I mean, if you think about it, the U.S. air balloon, whatever thing he had, was the first Air Force that the US ever had. She also was on a first name basis previously with all the generals and everything. But now we're in this 1952 bureaucratic era, and she can't talk to anyone to get them to be like, hey, can we work out a deal here? Pancho does not intend to give up her home and her livelihood without a fight or a fair price. And this new general is an asshole. He makes it so that the base surgeon is no longer allowed to treat Pancho's hostesses. She had a garbage contract with the Air Force Base where she would haul their garbage and get money that way. And he cancels that contract, and he attempts to make Happy Bottom Ranch off limits to everyone, all personnel. And when Pancho hears rumors that her club is in danger of being closed for alleged prostitution, she sues the U.S. government, asking for nearly $1.5 million in damages. This lawsuit is going to take years and years and years. I
just want to say it's so gross that she had a good relationship with everybody until she didn't. Until they're just like, oh, you don't matter anymore.
It was also a case of like the old timers were retiring and like all these newcomers came in. Mm-hmm. Also, the Air Force, like the base is like expanding. And now it's like, it's not like 3 guys running the place. It's like a whole thing. And it's like US bureaucracy. And it's like, she can't just talk to some guy. It's
it's just, I mean, she spent her whole life, being a pilot, being on airplanes, and then having her home destroyed by a runway. The irony.
Yeah. And her grandfather was like the father of the Air Force, basically. Yes. And the Air Force is what is ruining her livelihood. The general responds by severing all associations between the Air Force Base and the club and discourages civilians from going there as well. To thwart attacks on her reputation, she marries her ranch foreman named Mac. Oh, this is the man who's 18 years younger. I think I got it wrong on the previous.
Or are they all 18 years younger?
They're all young, but they all are young. She ignores warnings that Mac would leave her as soon as the government settles and take off with her money. While the Air Force Base is making plans to buy her ranch, Pancho tells them that she wants $3.5 million for her ranch. The base offers her $205,000. She files another lawsuit against the government, a $1.3 million inverse condemnation suit, which is seeking just compensation for the land that's taken for public use. The government maintains its $205,000 offer.
That's so insulting.
In September of 1953, Pancho wins a significant legal round when the judge denies the government's application for an immediate possession of Pancho's ranch. But then in November, a fire erupts. And when the base's crash and rescue team arrives to put out the fire, they find that the ranch's pool is empty and the water pump is broken. And they can't do anything to put out the fire, which then ravages the ranch, burning the clubhouse and Pancho's home to the ground. All her personal effects, her jewelry, her paintings, her trophies, her photos, all are lost. Only the motel and a small number of cabins and corrals and rodeo facilities survive, and the horses all escape injury. The origin of the fire is not able to be determined.
How mysterious. How suspicious. Coincidental, even.
Pancho says that the Air Force Base started the fire to further devalue her property. But then, you tell me, okay, what happens? A lot of Pancho's possessions that she had claimed to have lost in the fire were found in possession by various people around Southern California. The theory is she could have sent all her stuff to be stored with her friends and then started the fire herself.
But
I don't think she would do that. Yeah.
But it does devalue her property. So then why would she want to do that?
To make the government look bad, to make the government look like they sabotaged, that they started the fire. I don't buy that argument. I do think that the government started the fire. Just because
she could have just been giving her things away to her friends in preparation to lose her property, which she knew was coming.
There you go.
Right.
And then maybe she might have fibbed a little when she was talking about what she lost in the fire, as one does.
Yes.
When a fire goes through, it's like, oh yeah, and I lost this really, really expensive thing, because you want to get as much money as you
Or
possibly.
maybe she honestly forgot amongst all the chaos
Yeah.
that is happening when your property's trying to get taken, and also there's a fire. Like, there's a lot going on. I mean, she's also a completely wild animal who absolutely could have lit the fire herself. That is true. I don't think we can say it with full confidence.
Yeah. But actually, I cannot blame a girl for fibbing a little bit, even if she moved out her stuff off the property because she was moving,
Right.
and she lied on the paperwork and said, this stuff got destroyed. I need money compensation for it. Understandable why you would do that. And totally fuck the police.
Yep.
So the government pays her $190,000 to settle, allowing
less than they were originally offering.
Allowing the Air Force to officially take possession of the ranch, even though Pancho refused to accept the monetary offer. There's 2 more years of litigation, and this is all just due to Pancho being a feisty. She's like, not going to give up. And finally, the court declares that the government had unjustly accused Pancho of operating a whorehouse and awards her $414,000, which, I mean, so in total, she gets a little more, like $800,000. So Pancho feels vindicated. She moves all her personnel and her 125 horses and 400 hogs to her new Gypsy Springs Ranch Airport, which is 30 miles north in California City. Unfortunately, the environment and with Pancho's dwindling finances, they are not able to sustain Pancho's dreams, and she's forced to close the new airport. Her 70th birthday is celebrated with many well-known aviators like Jimmy Doolittle and Buzz Aldrin. And on April 5th, 1975, she's scheduled to be a speaker at the Antelope Valley Aero Museum. But when a friend calls her 6 days before the event, she can't reach her. Her son Bill goes to check on her and finds her dead in her home. And the coroner determines that she had died a week earlier of unknown causes, possibly related to her breast cancer. The son gets permission to spread her ashes over the former site of Happy Bottom Riding Club from his Cessna. As he takes flight over the site, a crosswind sweeps the ashes back into the plane. And he says, even in death, she still loved a good joyride.
I know that we had so many things to cover, but I didn't realize that her son still, even with she wasn't really around, he's raised more by his dad, I assume, that he shares her love of flying. That's really sweet.
Yeah, right? And Pancho's life and personality are portrayed in the 1983 film The Right Stuff. Mm-hmm. She was also the subject of a 1988 film, Pancho Barnes, starring Valerie Bernelli.
And that's so funny, Jake. And I cannot quite picture Valerie Bertinelli in such a role, but good for her.
Yeah. Numerous biographies have been written about her. In the 2019 Captain Marvel film, Captain Marvel's bar is called Pancho's Bar.
Oh, cute.
And that's the story of Professor Thaddeus Lowe's granddaughter, the granddaughter of the man who is pretty much responsible for founding the Air Force. He was the first air spy during the U.S. Civil War. And in a strange turn of events, her life would be incredibly entwined with the Air Force. And I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, her story is so weaving in and out of all these different LA things, right. The Hollywood piece, and then the entertainment club, restaurant, bar, whatever's happening over there. And then, getting tangled up with the Air Force. And wow, yeah, what a life.
And what a just chaotic personality. And this is why we need Netflix series starring Madeline Sammy.
Madeline Sammy led Netflix series. We'll cast all the husbands. We got it. Yeah. What a fascinating character.
Thank you for hanging with me on this incredible story. So what are you up to and looking forward to?
I am up to just being around to help with the podcast. So you just let me know what we're working on.
We have to,
I'm around.
We have to think of, what are we going to do next?
Well, there was one of her lovers who was murdered, right?
Oh, yeah. So we're going to do Ramon Navarro. Yeah.
Yeah, Ramon Navarro. And then we'll have to think of some other things. I would love to do a little more history into Scientology in LA, but I also don't want us to end up on a Scientology watch list. So
no, I'm okay with it.
Well, you live closer than I do. They'll get to you before me.
God, Scientology is such a big, crazy thing. Where do you even start? You'd have to figure out some small aspect of Scientology to go deep into. I used to live right next to the Blue Scientology Center. It's crazy. And I did keep on getting mailings from, like, I think my previous person who lived in my apartment was a Scientologist because I'd get all their mail and stuff, and it was creepy.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to look into that. So maybe we can try and tackle that one.
Have you watched the Leah Remini documentary? Okay, good.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm just going to think of more stories to talk about. We're going to have fun covering everything that's crazy around Southern California.
Yes, it's my favorite place, and it is weird.
Yeah. And if you would like to be part of the show or have an idea for a future episode, email us at hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com and let everyone know that this is a good show and it's a good time and we have lots of crazy stories. So give us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at Haunted Hollywood Hour Podcast, all one word. Until next time, bye.